This is CJ again with the GOAT Sports Talk. Just wanted to kind of flip the script a little bit, just kind of discussing the revenue of the different major league sports around the world. Of course, over here in America, the United States of America to be more exact, we have no idea about, the standing of these different leagues compared to, other leagues around the world. Now, it's long been told to us that the NFL is the highest grossing sport or professional sports league in the world, and that is correct. As you see here, it is $13 billion. Part of the reason why I'm discussing this is just to kind of go, into, whether or not NFL players should be making more money. And when you compare it to NBA, just as a comparison, since these big mega contracts have been being signed, which is something that before this sports page was talked about, that I talked about a lot, especially after the Mike Conley contract of last year. That was an eye-opening contract that gave you a sign of things to come with players that probably will not make an all-star team but are good enough to be starters, and that they'll be getting paid these mega dollars as compared to other sports. Now, if you see here, the NBA gross the revenue is $4.8 billion, and that's with being a global sport, which is amazing. Because of the NBA, as far as basketball globally in many countries is their second most popular sport after soccer. Okay, so when you look at baseball with $9.5 billion, that's pretty lucrative. Now, a lot of this is due to the massive TV deals. I mean, if you're talking about the TV deals with, especially with the NFL, that's a big deal. Major League Baseball, as we know, has, some of their own private networks. Of course, you got the Yes Network with the Yankees. You also have, I believe some of the LA markets have their own networks as well. And then you have the big TV deal with pretty much, ESPN carries a lot of their games. Also, you have Fox as well. So those are very big contracts. When you coming into the NFL, it's the same thing. So when you're talking about, their ability to get those type of big contracts, that's part of the reason why I do expect NBA to continue to rise and at least get up to closer to the level of Major League Baseball. Probably won't catch NFL anytime soon, because NFL, one thing with NFL that's so great about it is the fact that from a fan standpoint, you don't even need to be in a big market. Like, players want to be in a big market, but if you examine the fact that players most of the year are not even going to be playing for their team, they're not going to be living where they're at. You could play for Green Bay and live pretty much in Florida, live in LA or whatever. They might just have a home there, but really they're only there for 8 games out of the season, possibly playoffs, and then pretty much preseason is in different cities. And a lot of times their camps, their preseason camps, are not even in the same city. A lot of times they're in bigger cities. They're down south, they're out west where the weather's better, and then they fly for their games. So a lot of times, man, people don't know is that these players, they don't care about living. Of course, they'd want to play for certain teams. Of course, when you're talking about like teams like the Dallas Cowboys, Dallas Cowboys is probably one of the franchises where you got players that actually truly want to play for them, regardless if they're from Texas or not. They want to play with the glitz and the glamour that the Dallas Cowboys provide. Of course, they're known as America's team, but outside of that, it doesn't really matter for these players. They just want to go where they can make good money. They're going to live, half the year as far as have a contract. They'll have their main home there, but in the off season, they can take their wives, themselves, if they're single, to other cities. That's why a lot of times if you're in these different cities like LA, Miami, you'll run into these players all the time. You'll run into those type of players all the time from these other teams that are living in these other places. They're coming to Houston and they're training, for a month or two. Then they go somewhere else and they train elsewhere, and then they link up with their team. Now, as far as with Major League Baseball, Major League Baseball, to a certain degree, I'm almost like, how are they still relevant? But I believe the older generation has a lot of their eyes still in the game. And I speak this as my own personal experience, especially with my old man. I mean, he still watches a lot of baseball. So, you got an older crowd that's still into it, and you got a younger crowd that either played it growing up, like played Little League, played high school, maybe even played college, maybe JUCO or whatever. So you got people that have probably played and they love the game or they love their team. And it just depends, because I believe that when it comes to baseball, you have multiple types of fans of baseball. You have the baseball purists that truly love the sport. Then you have like the fans that, love their team because their team is dominant or puts out a good product year in, year out. For example, generally, at least me growing up, St. Louis Cardinals were usually always good. Almost every year was the St. Louis Cardinals. Then you got like the Boston Red Sox, and you got the Yankees, you got the Giants. You got those type of teams that generally were putting out, when I was growing up, good teams. So the whole city's gonna ride for them. You know what I'm saying? Whereas like you got other cities, it's like it's up and down. If their team is rolling, then people are going to the games. It gets popular, and then everybody's rolling for them. Now, speaking as far as like places like Houston, where I'm at, the Astros have very good fan support. Even when they were sorry, they have some very diehard loyal fans, and then you got fans that are just always, on the lookout watching. So I could see to a certain degree when you factor in just the sheer amount of games and that they have in baseball, which is insane. They have so many games that it makes sense that they would generate so much revenue because of just the sheer amount of games they play and their TV contracts. Jerseys sells not so much, but I can tell you one thing is that baseball apparel, in terms of hats, especially hats sell a lot. When it comes to baseball hats, that's why I still call it a baseball hat. It doesn't matter if it's an NFL team. It was originally made for baseball. That's why it's called a baseball cap, and that generates a lot of revenue year in, year out for Major League Baseball. Now, on to the less popular stuff for people going on into NHL. We're going to briefly talk about that. NHL, of course, had their own issues with financial situations with between the players and owners, which is understandable because the product was not good. It wasn't popular. It wasn't generating the money that it used to, and now they're bouncing back. They're adding teams. In fact, they added the Golden Knights, I believe, over there in Las Vegas. They have a team out in Nashville. So anytime a league is growing and expanding and able to create their own arenas, that's always a good sign, at the end of the day. And so NHL is back. Down south, it's not really popular. I know growing up, the Dallas Stars were popular among certain people that I knew. I'm not from Dallas, but Dallas Stars, Houston did not have its own, NHL team. They did have, I believe, a lower level pro team that was called the Houston Aeros. So I remember Mike Modano. I remember all that. Like, it's crazy, but hockey was more popular in the 90s than it was now. I mean, I recall the 90s and hockey, all the sports were popular. Like, everybody knew the top players for all the sports, even if you didn't watch them. It was just that crazy. You just knew. You knew about Jaromir Jagr. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you knew about these guys. That's this crazy thing about it. I mean, you knew about these. Heck, you even had rappers go back in the day. You have rappers that rocked hockey jerseys. You know what I'm saying? I mean, as from a fashion statement. Heck, one of the more famous images of Tupac is him wearing a Detroit Red Wings jersey and spitting on somebody. Okay? I mean, so you're talking about a completely different time. I mean, I don't know what happened with hockey, that it just kind of fell off in a way, but hey, things happen. Now, of course, we skipped over something that you might have seen, the English Premier League. The English Premier League is a soccer league. I'm gonna call it soccer because over here, but it's really football because it's played with your foot. All right, I know a lot of Americans get offended by that, but it is the true football. Okay, that's why the NFL, college football, as it's called here, should be called American football. Now, the English Premier League has major TV contracts. Of course, with the rate reach that the English language has, that they're going to get better deals, and and they have some of the most well-watched teams in all of soccer. I'm gonna just use that word just for the American listeners. And they have, some of the best teams, out there as far as, when you're talking about Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United, Arsenal, even, other teams are starting to come up like Everton. So, when you examine that, some of the legends have played for these teams, including Cristiano Ronaldo, who was over at Manchester United, Thierry Henry. I mean, the list goes on and on. And we're not talking about just players that are from England. We're talking about worldwide players that played, that are from other countries, that are playing in that league. And it's a highly entertaining league. Some of the best, I guess you can say gameplay announcers you'll hear in all of sports come out of the English Premier League. I mean, it makes people want to watch it, even if you're not interested in it. They just make it seem so exciting. So, I mean, definitely they're going to make money. I'm surprised they're not making more, but I believe what has happened is this. You got to factor in that you have different national leagues. So in England, you have, let me see here. In fact, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so in England, you have the English Premier League, of course. Then you have the Bundesliga, okay, over in Germany, which this is right here, that 2.8 billion. And then you have La Liga, which is 2.2 billion. Okay, these are the Spanish and the German leagues. And you have Serie A, which is the Italian league. Then you have Standard League, which is the French league. And when you combine all of these together, I believe that really, when you really look at it, the major four leagues, because Standard League is good. One thing about the French league is that's underrated, is the French league always assembles a lot of very young talent, and then they end up going to some of the other leagues. So the French league is good. If you're watching like PSG, I mean, they have a lot of money. You're going to see some amazing talent over there. And PSG at some point should be like in a Champions League final or winning a Champions League final, because they just have that kind of money. And they should be able to assemble a team that can compete in the Champions League. All right, for anybody that doesn't know what a Champions League is basically like the mother of all tournaments in sports, period. Like, I know people think about, the NFL playoffs and the NBA playoffs, but in terms of professional sports, outside of like World Cup soccer, that is like the biggest tournament. Like, that tournament is literally damn near year round. The best teams from all these different leagues that qualify, they compete for like one super trophy that's basically bigger than the Super Bowl. Okay, so at the end of the day, I believe that the top league right now, even though it is English Premier League, there is a heavy bias for La Liga, because of the fact that, it just seems like a lot of the top players that win those World Player of the Year awards, or the Ballon d'Or as it's called, a lot of them tend to be playing in La Liga. There's a heavy bias. Not that those players are not good. I mean, heck, when you look at it, Cristiano Ronaldo dominated, the English Premier League, along with, at the time, or as what's his name was on his way out, Thierry Henry. There's a lot of good players that came out of there, but he was at Manchester United, and he actually won that award, and that's very rare. It's very hard. A lot of English Premier League players, they tend to finish second or third year in, year out. It's just a heavy bias. And I think that's part of the reason why La Liga is always viewed as being a top league. But when you look at the parity, there's a lot more parity in the English Premier League. For example, when you go to La Liga, only two teams for like the last damn near 15 to 20 years is winning that league. And that's FC Barcelona and Real Madrid. Occasionally, you might get like Atletico Madrid that might come up in there. Other than that, you're not really seeing much action from the other teams. And it's just basically just a couple of super teams dominating a weaker league. And that's really what it is. Bundesliga has a little bit more parity. Of course, the top team in there is Bayern Munich. So, I mean, we're definitely talking about some things. And for some of the yous that like, soccer as it's called here, if you like this, you're pretty much liking some stuff I'm talking about. This is stuff that if someone who just follows soccer, you're going to know about. But Bundesliga has a lot of very good teams. They tend to field teams that are older, past their prime, or towards the end of their prime players. So you'll get a lot of very good technical game there. You'll get some good young German players in that league. But you got Dortmund as well. But not too many dominant teams. But Bayern Munich always feels like a nice one. But when you combine all of these leagues, as far as soccer, them themselves collectively is, to me, the biggest world sport professionally to watch when you combine them all in. Serie A, I don't want to go too deep into it. You have a couple of teams over there, Inter Milan, Internazionale, Juventus. You got some good teams. Sometimes AS Roma puts together a good team. So you got some teams over there, but ultimately, I'm not going to go through the other stuff. Rugby, fall back. I'm not going to talk about something that I don't know about. I'm going to leave that to the Aussie rules people that are experts. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, NFL is still king. And when you look at these other leagues, they're paying some of their players handsomely well. So NFL should be able to do a little bit more. I know it's the 53-man roster. We'll discuss probably some of that in a later date, but I just wanted to share this with y'all. Hopefully this is something that y'all were interested in seeing, and go ahead and sign out.